Alrighty, welcome to the channel, my DAO repository. Um, for this video, it's going to be my fourth installment of Copic SP to paper. Moving forward, I'm going to be changing the naming scheme of my videos. It's not going to be some random name. I'm probably going to name the piece, potentially. Granted, like the piece is in constant work, so the name will also be in constant work, but it'll definitely have the chapter and name of the book I'm going to be reading and the title and within the description and potentially like a link to the book either through like Amazon and or like to an official site by the publisher and or author. um, for the first book that I'm going to be reading, I'm going to be doing slash covering Daoist meditation. It's a technique of, and the technique is called Purification of the Heart. I think it's an excellent book. I've read it, and I highly recommend it to the point in which I'm going to be reading it for my videos. I'll add some of my own commentary, and within these videos, it's going to be a constant like growth for myself as far as my ability to read out loud and hopefully over time be able to get better at pronunciation for certain words, especially like any words that are in a foreign language. Like I'm going to butcher, and I will make comments on it moving forward. Anytime that I feel like I'm butchering a name or an action, what have you, that's from a foreign language, and I'm just trying to translate it. Little quotation marks right there. Um, but it's going to be a constant, like me trying to progress and be able to read out loud. And then hopefully it becomes bearable for you guys, the audience, and myself to re listen to it and make sure I didn't fluff up too bad. But yeah, this video I'm going to cover like the introduction to, like within the book, and chapter 1 and chapter 2. Um, I don't know if every video is going to hold 2 chapters. This one's just doing it, and I'm going to edit it to make it length appropriate. It's gonna like pretty much have, it's gonna be a longer video. It's gonna be like 28 or 30 minutes long, but it's gonna have 2 of my individual like times of working on my art piece, and I'm gonna have to already like cut a new introduction into my audio for this book, but the nuances are there. Moving forward though, I think I'll have it a more streamlined process, or that's what I'm hoping for. But without too much of a pause, I'm going to jump into the book. It's called, yet again, Daoist Meditation. Um, the first little introduction pages, the Purification of the Heart Method of Meditation, and Discourse on Sitting and Forgetting, Zhu Wang Lin, by Sima Cheng Zen, translated from Chinese into Portuguese, and with a commentary by Wu-Yen Charang, with Marique Colho de Souza for transcripting, editing, and adaptation of texts. Forwarded by Eve Wang. English translations by Benjamin Adam Cohn. First published in 2015 by Singing Dragon, and then copyright the Estate Master Wu Jin Charang 2015. Next page. In Taoism, the crane is a symbol. The crane is the bird symbol for immortality. Legends tell that when someone attains realization on the Taoist spiritual path, he leaves the manifested world to inhabit the sacred world, ascends while mounted on a crane, which opens its wings and flies towards heaven, transporting the immortal to the dimension of the absolute. And then forward. Although I've never met Master Wu Zhenchen in this lifetime, I felt a strong connection to him and his teachings. The moment I stepped into the Taoist temple he had founded in Rio de Janeiro and Sao Paulo, oof, which I experienced, there was simplicity, humility, and clarity, the virtues embodied by Taoist sages. I think that had we met in person, we would certainly have become good friends. Damn, I am struggling right now. The fact that we did not meet in this mortal realm, however, did not diminish our connectedness. I was informed by Master Trang's students that he had told them to approach me for advice should the need arise. That need occurred when he passed away several years ago, and fulfillment of that need emerged during my visit to Brazil in the early 2008. What started as a casual meeting with fellow Taoist practitioners became a friendship with the community he had left behind in Rio de Janeiro. Oof, I am sorry for pronouncing that probably wrong. Now, Master Trang's lifetime of work and teachings on Daoist meditation are being published in this book, and I have the honor of being asked to say something about it. First, Daoist meditation has often been cloaked in mystery and secrecy. As a result, much of the teachings have been misunderstood and practiced inappropriately. This book presents a fresh and straightforward approach to Taoist meditation that integrates a faithful rendition of the original teachings with modern practices and applications. The teachings in this book are based on extensively on Tang Dynasty Shangqi Patriarchy. See Ma Cheng Zen's text, Zhu Wang Lun, Discourse and Sitting and Forgetting. Zhu Wang Lun is not only of the most important Taoist texts ever written, it is definitely a work on the method of Taoist meditation known as Nin Guan, internal observation. Nin Guan, as a method of meditation, is simple and profound at the same time. It is very effective in diminishing discursive thinking and in dissolving the sense of permanence of ego or self. Thus, Sima Cheng Zen's titled his work Discourse on Sitting and Forgetting. Whether Ningen is practiced simply as a way of relaxing body and mind, or used as the foundation to cultivate, and stabilize stillness in the more advanced stages of Taoist meditation, this form of meditation is invaluable. Second, Master Trang has made a monumental contribution in not only translating and explaining the Zhu Wenglin, but also in teaching Nigen in a practice, safe, and accessible way. This text gives the reader a background of the language and philosophy of Taoism, and the clear and concise way in which the technique of Nigen is taught and guided through the book will give both beginning students of Taoist meditation as well as adept practitioners a valuable path to strengthen their practice. When you read this book, you will not only be learning one of the most profound practices of Taoist meditation, most importantly, you will see the heart and meet the mind of the Taoist master who written it. Yep, and then I'll be rolling into chapter 1 right now. Chapter 1, Introduction. The literal translation of the Chinese word for meditation is to sit in stillness, or to sit in silence. Externally, the practitioner sits on a cushion, ceases all movements and noises produced by his body, and remains in silence. Internally, he ceases all thoughts and sits in silence, to which his mind is transformed. The immediate effect of well-executed meditation sessions is achieving internal tranquility. Sitting in silence is like leading one's body and mind into an experience of profound rest. At the end of an exhausting day, people usually rest to recharge their energy, normally by means of sleeping, and thus temporarily distancing themselves from the manifestations of the outside world. When they wake up, they are reinvigorated, and that is how Taoism explains the benefits afforded by meditation, a period of rest, which has the effect of restoring one's energy, enlightening one's mind, and strengthening one's physical body. But the therapeutic benefits do not represent the main objective of Taoist meditation. It does indeed promote physical, energetic, and mental recuperation and frees one from chronic fatigue and anxiety. But above all these effects, the fundamental purpose is to lead the practitioner to enlightenment. That is why Taoism meditation is considered to be the main tool for following the path and reaching Tao. Its effects, therefore, cannot be confused with therapy. They are merely represent secondary benefits for the follower of the tradition. He who meditates finds inner silence, but to reach that state, he must first pass through the process of systematically forgetting. This entails the gradual forgetting of external noises, of one's body noises, and one's words. The internal dialogue and ego, where in achieving an increasingly relaxed state and upon reaching complete silence, one forgets one's own identity, the place one is located, the things which have occurred during the day, the projects. Fuck, a fly flew in my mouth. The projects to which one has commitments, and even one is sat down meditating. Beginners tend to feel somewhat afraid when faced with this world of silence into which they are about to plunge. It usually represents a completely unknown situation, and the person fears being immediately disconnected from the physical world and losing his reference in life when returning from meditation. The greatest fear is of completely losing consciousness and, in some cases, failing to return from that experience. However, this fear is unfounded. First, when penetrating the world of silence, the practitioner is obliged to return to the everyday world precisely because one's ties always bring one back. And second, because if sitting in stillness is a tool which leads to Tao, and if the Tao is enlightenment or pure consciousness, this shadow that the practitioner does not lose consciousness in a state of complete forgetting. The mind becomes silent, but within one's consciousness, a continuous process of expansion develops towards Tao. The result of this expansion, therefore, depends on the level of progressive forgetting. The more thoughts and emotions a person manages to forget during the practice, the closer he will become to spiritual achievement. That is why a deliberate effort is needed to detach oneself from facts, ideas, and feelings which prevent the practitioner from entering into progressive forgetting. The more ties one has, the more fears one nurtures, and the more fears, the harder one finds it to give up oneself to meditation without inhibitions. However, it must be acknowledged that with beginning the practice, people are able to sit but rarely manage to penetrate stillness and to forget. Therefore, upon reaching that stage, the beginner goes through a phase of learning to forget and how and to do so. He needs to be guided by this method. By a method. Considering all circumstances in the Taoist Society of Brazil, which is where the author originates, and by the choices and guidance of my meditation Master Ma He Yang, I adopted an age-old Taoist meditation method called Zin Zai Fa, which I now shall go on to explain. And me cutting in here. Anytime I say my master, it's not referring to me. It's straight from the book. Yeah, I do not have a master, but I every once in a while try to follow this method. So, yep, moving on. Chapter 2, Fundamentals of the Method. Seeing how I'm at 9 minutes now, I might read. I don't think I'll be able to finish the chapter, but we'll continue. Fundamentals of the method. Zin means heart, Zai means purify, and Fa means method. Zin Zai Fa, therefore, means the purification of the heart method, understood as the purification of substance of a person. The method is found upon the story of Zhuang Zi, which I transcribe below and then comment on. In this tale, the author simulates a brief dialogue through which Master Kong Fu-zi teaches his disciple, Yang Hui, the subtle and correct way to meditate. Yet again, forewarning, I am going to butcher all of these names. Yang Hui said, "My family is poor. I have not drunk wine or eaten strong food for many months, so can I be considered as being purified?" Kong Fu-zi replied, "This is what one does before a sacrificial ceremony. It is not purification of the heart." Yang Hui said, "Can I ask, what is purification of the heart?" Kong Fu-zi replied, "Your will must be one. Do not listen with your ears, but with your heart. Do not listen with your heart, but with your breath. Ears can only listen, the heart can only contemplate, but the breath is the emptiness, receptive to all things. Tao is related to the emptiness, and the emptiness purifies the heart." Zhuangzi is considered the second greatest Taoist thinker after Laozi. He often wrote idolized dialogue attributed to well-known people, like Yang Hui and Kong Fu-zi, who did in fact exist, and were indeed master and disciple. In this example, Zhuangzi says, in the voice of Kong Fu-zi, the clergyman who would diet before sacrificial ceremonies and ancient customs, but that itself does not guarantee purification of the heart. The relationship between healthy eating and the process of spiritual purification exists only to the extent that a higher degree of physical purity leads to better health. Health in a perfect state generates the most suitable conditions for receiving the sacred force and greater well-being for executing the practice. Purification of the heart is not achieving simply by abstaining from food and drink, because if this were the case, the poorest men in the world would be enlightened. Genuine enlightenment comes from within the person and not without. Then the disciple asks what purification of the heart is, seeking to find how to achieve it. The master answers that for such a method he should have one single will. This is the first condition. He adds that the disciple should not listen with his ears, but with his heart, and should not listen with his heart, but with his breath. To have a single will is to have a will which does not disperse and is concentrated on one single goal. Keeping that mind on breathing, listening with the ears is listening with the five senses. Listening with the heart is listening with the single inner sense. And listening with the breath is becoming one owns breathing. The method works in 3 stages: concentration, contemplation, and fusion. He who manages to become his own breathing reaches the last stage and finds purification of the heart. Taoism teaches that human beings... Taoism teaches that the human being is made up of 4 elements. Time to butcher some things. Jing, Qi, Shen, and Zhang. I don't think I pronounced Zhang right, but it's essence, breath, spirit, and nature. The objective of the heart purification method what was it? Excuse me. Is to use the physical body to unite the Shen and the Qi, spirit and breath, until Xing, nature, is reached. When this union is achieved, the practitioner completes the 3 stages of the method and is fused with Xing, which Xing is nature. The first stage of the method is concentration. When Kong Fu Zai says, your will must be one and correspond to the stage at which the practitioner is listening with his ears, then exercise beings of focus on the mind, on the air which is breathed. At this stage, he perceives the noise and movements of the air in his respiratory tract, as if he were outside of his own body and hearing the respirations through a stethoscope. Consciousness becomes separate from energy, like the spectator who looks at a body to which he does not belong. The breath often becomes out of rhythm, gasping or apparently suspended. In this case, one can increase or reduce the degree of concentration. To restore the natural rhythm of the body's inhalation and exhalation, this effort will cause the practitioner to become naturally detached from all manifestations of the mind and eliminate all disordered thoughts, which are transformed into one single concentrated thought, maintaining natural breathing. This is the meaning of Zhuangzi's words. He says, your will must be one. The second stage of this method is contemplation. When Kong Fu Zi says, do not listen with your ears, but your heart. Listening with your heart is to cease perceiving the noises and movements of the air in the respiratory tract and start contemplating the breathing directly with the inner sense. Contemplation is achieved when one reaches the correct level of concentration. By keeping himself concentrated on that natural rhythm of breathing, the practitioner empties his mind of all thoughts and feelings, and in this condition assimilates his breath through contemplation. Upon abstracting himself from his physical body and from the outside world, he starts to identify in the moment of his breath the physical automation that controls his life energy. He continues like this until becoming a part of that air that he is breathing and reaches understanding that he himself only exists as consciousness, which is manifested as part of autonomous mechanism of his breathing. Then he starts to allow himself to breathe through the air that enters and leaves his body, because he finds natural understanding that the subject of his breathing is not himself, but rather the air which he is part of while contemplating. At that point, the person stops listening to the breathing with his ears and starts to hear it with his heart. This is the meaning of Zhuangzi's words when he says, "Do not listen with your ears, but with your heart." The third stage of this method is fusion. When Kung Fu Zi says, "Do not listen with your heart, but with your breath," listening with one's breath means becoming one's own breathing. And being one's own breathing, it shall be the breathing of all beings of the universe. This result arises when the practitioner reaches the third stage of the heart purification method. And there is fusion between Shin and Qi, the spirit and the breath. In accordance with the time and level of dedication to the contemplation stage, the distance between consciousness and energy is progressively reduced until it disappears. The practitioner will then have the consciousness, or Shin, entirely united with energy, or Qi. His breath becomes a spiritual breath, and his spirit becomes an energetic spirit. Only then are the manifestations of the universe assimilated through his breath. This is the meaning of Zhuangzi's words when he says, "Do not listen with your heart, but with your breath." After explaining the three stages of the method, Zhuangzi continues the teaching, talking to his disciple through words attributed to Confucius and hypothetically directed at Yang Hui. He taught the ears and the heart have a limited reach and can only listen and contemplate, but the breath, as it is the emptiness itself, is receptive to all existence and possibilities of existence. And that is precisely why Tao is related to it. Finally, as in this emptiness, as it is the emptiness, and as Tao it is related to it, the breath is the purifier of the heart. This passage was written in synthetic Hermetic manner to make it easier to understand, meaning the meaning of its words. I shall now highlight the meaning and concepts of Zen, Shen, and Qi, nature, spirit, and breath, as categories used by the Taoist tradition to teach the path which leads its followers to enlightenment. Of the word Tao and emptiness used by Zhuangzi in the story, and the following meaning of emptiness, or Xing, as a purifier of a person's heart. And that was the end of chapter 2. And that took me all the way over to 21 minutes. So for the next video, I'll be going into chapter 3, and that's going to be theoretical considerations. And seeing how complicated chapter 2 was, this only gets more complicated. So I appreciate y'all for listening and watching. The next video will be posted relatively soon, and then I'll be going over to chapter 3, maybe chapter 4 within that, so on and so forth. Like and subscribe if you're willing. Not necessary though, but it helps the channel. And have a good day.